We're on episode 227 with Stephen Donnelly. Hi, Stephen. How are you today?
Elizabeth, thank you so much. I'm doing wonderful. It's been a great morning so far, and I look forward to talking with you.
Well, I'm excited to talk to you. When I was introduced to you, and Diane, or I think it was Diane, sent me the clip of your YouTube, and it was and I'll include it with the podcast today. But wow, that really got me inspired and intrigued, and I couldn't wait to talk to you and hear your story. So will you tell us what it was like, what happened, and what it's like today?
I'd love to. What it was like was the fact that I started drinking and then drugging as a teenager, and it carried on for many years. And of course, in the beginning, it was just the weekend warrior stuff. And then in 1976, when I was 21 years old, I was introduced to cocaine, and cocaine became my lifeline. Cocaine was my partner, my significant other, whatever we'd like to call it, for about 25 years. Drinking was much a part of it as well. Initially going to bars and parties, but then it got to be the sense of isolation, that I would drink by myself, and I would certainly use cocaine totally by myself. Didn't share it with anybody. I didn't go out partying. And that went on for many years. I went through a lot of money. I ended up stealing money. It was just a horror show. On November 29th, there was a intervention. The people who I worked for, I was a Catholic priest. I was in a parish, and there was an intervention that saved my life. That's not my sobriety date, November 29th, 2000, but it certainly was the turning point in my life. I was sent away, I like to say hijacked, to a rehab upstate New York. It was about 3 hours from where I was down here on Long Island. And it changed my life. But I was a sick man, and I was in this rehab. I thought it was going to be for 28 days. I knew that I was going to be there through Christmas, and that was very upsetting, both as a priest, but also as a brother, son, uncle, and my dear friend to many people, that I was not going to be home on Christmas. And I stayed through Christmas, through January, through February, through March, and into mid-April, April 13th to be precise. And the whole time I was there, the 135 days that I was up in rehab, I had no problem admitting that I was an addict, because cocaine had beaten the daylights out of me, emotionally, physically, spiritually, financially. I was bankrupt in so many different areas. And I would say, my name is Stephen, I'm an addict, but I would not say that I was an alcoholic, because in my heart of hearts, I didn't think I was an alcoholic. So after being in this rehab, 18 weeks, I came home, and what's a good alcoholic do? They drink. And so the first day out of rehab, I didn't think of calling anybody. I didn't follow any suggestions whatsoever. And I drank. Drinking, alcoholism is a progressive disease. It didn't get progressive for me, but it got to be like every day that I was drinking. I had stayed away from cocaine for that length of time. However, I found a package that I had left behind. I proceeded to do it. I wasn't one for suggestions, so why would I call anybody? If I called somebody, they would tell me, don't do it, throw it away, or I'll be right there. No, I wanted to do it. Could be frugal at times, so I used the cocaine. And 3 days later, I was at my first outpatient meeting, and I was given a cup to take care of business, so to speak. And when I went back to the outpatient facility 4 days later, they told me that I'd come up dirty, and the church sent me back up to rehab. And I thought, I had no idea. I didn't know what I was thinking, but I did think that I was going to be there for a long time again. And I was there for 30 days. And at that point, this was the end of June 2001, I started to take things serious, because I realized that, yes, I hadn't done cocaine, but the one time, and I knew how much damage that had done. But the alcohol, I did not believe in my mind that it had damaged me that much. Physically, I was fine. Thank God I had no problem with the liver. Health and annual checkups were all fine. So I started to subscribe minimally. Now, I didn't buy in completely, but I subscribed minimally to the program, did what I needed to do. But then that temptation, I'm an alcoholic. Yes, I had no problem admitting I was a drug addict, but I am just as much an alcoholic as I am a drug addict. And it wasn't maybe 6 months, 8 months that I started drinking occasionally. And then the proprietor of this rehab asked me to come up and do a service on the first anniversary of the horrific events of September 11th, 2001. And on September 10th, 2002, which is my sobriety date, because it's the last day I've had any mood altering substance, on the way up to the facility, I decided to get a bottle of Chardonnay. Why not? It's a 2.5 hour trip. Let me enjoy the trip. Sick, sick, sick. But I did that. When I arrived at the facility, they noticed that I was probably a little bit woozy, and they put me into a room, which was a normal procedure. I'd gone up there a number of times to visit, and they came to my room and they gave me a breathalyzer, and I blew a 15. And then they said, get a good night's sleep, and we'll talk to you in the morning. And on the morning of September 11th, 2002, I was back in the fellowship. And thank God, that time it was only for about 8 days. I had a wedding that I had to celebrate 10 days later, and I did come home. But I realized on the evening of September 10th, 2002, that I was beat up. I was beat up. And it was at that moment that I did the third step, because the first step, I knew I could admit very easily that I was the addict. And then now I could admit that I was an alcoholic. My life was certainly unmanageable. Come to believe, I did never spend, the second step was the easiest step of the 12 for me. But even though I was a Catholic priest and did things for God, with God, through God, is I had turned away from God. God never turned away from me. Mm. And it was that night of September 10th, 2002, that I finally did the third step, that I surrendered. I put the white flag up. I realized that cocaine, alcohol had beat me up, and I wanted nothing to do with that. And when I returned to Long Island after the 8-day stay, I bought into the program hook, line, and sinker. I did everything that was suggested. Got a home group, 90 meetings in 90 days, almost 90 meetings in 90 days, but got the sponsor, got the commitment, and I did what was necessary, because I didn't want to go back to that way of life. And I had a great sponsor. We worked through the steps. I did what was necessary, and with the grace of God and the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, for the last 18 years, I continue to maintain my sobriety one day at a time. I never say to anybody that I'll never drink again. I could say to you, Elizabeth, and to anybody listening, watching, I'm not going to have a drink today. I went to a meeting a couple hours ago, and it was very interesting, because it's a men's group. We socially distance, and we have to wear masks, and it is what it is right now, and I can accept that. But when we read from the 24-hour book today, it was a great concept, because it talked about the fellowship of our drinking days and the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. The fellowship of my drinking days, yes, I drank with people, but it was so superficial. There was no relationship whatsoever. It was just, if you had money in your pocket and you could put money on the bar, they were your friends. In Alcoholics Anonymous, and I would believe in any 12-step program, there's a true sense of fellowship. There's a true sense of unity. It's not just a superficial BS. It's all about what's going on in your life today. What type of pain do you have? How do I share this pain with others? And the other people in the room, whether it be at the men's group this morning, or whether it be at an open meeting with men and women, is somebody in that room can identify with you, and somebody in that room could help you. And I cannot thank God, yes, and the men and women in Alcoholics Anonymous. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I realized that I had to do every day of my drinking, every day of my drugging to be the person that I am. I'm not a scripture scholar, but I do know a little bit of scripture. I did proclaim it every day for all the time that I was a priest. And in Paul's letter, Paul wrote many different letters, but in his letter to Corinthians, there's a beautiful verse. It says that our greatest weakness will become our greatest strength. And I believe that, and I've lived that. My greatest weakness of addiction, my greatest weakness of alcoholism has become my greatest strength. And I embrace the 12 steps. I live one day at a time, and I help many different people. I sponsored many people through the years. Some of them are still sober, and some of them, unfortunately, are not sober. But I firmly believe that when the addict or the alcoholic throws up the white flag and surrenders to the God of their understanding, higher power, whatever people choose to call him, her, or it, they have a strong chance with sobriety. And I'm just blessed to be sober today.
Thank you so much for that, Stephen. And you mentioned that you were a priest. You were a priest.
Yes.
And you were ordained when you were how old?
I was a late vocation. I was ordained at 42 years old. I came into the seminary in my mid-30s, and it was God's way of calling me. And it was a great call. And I really loved every day of being a priest. I'm not a priest today because of an incident that happened in 2018. A woman made allegations against me, and I was suspended and then removed. But I continue to do God's work. Yes, not from the domain of the church, but through the relationships one-on-one, or going to meetings and writing the book is just a way I share so basically I share my experience, strength, and hope in the book that we've written, A Saint and a Sinner. And it's a story of my struggles. It's a story of my recovery. It's a story of growth. It's a story of hope that's available to anybody. The disease of addiction, the disease of alcoholism takes no prisoners. It could hit anybody whatsoever, from the richest person in the world to the person who's homeless and everybody in between. But this beautiful gift of recovery is available to everybody, those who are well off and those who may not be well off. Yeah.
Well, it's huge. Well, for one, it's to say you're courageous would be an understatement, given the fact, I was raised Roman Catholic myself. So, priests, doctors, politicians, they're all put on this pedestal that's so high above us, right? They're like, yes. Oh my gosh, they're perfect. They're infallible. They're like, they have no character defects. They're just perfect. They're God's children. And I have so many questions in regards to that, because for one, knowing you were a Catholic priest and you were sober for 16 years, right?
Yes.
While you're up on the altar. And I know when you mix the blood of Christ and the blood of salvation, the body of Christ and the blood of salvation, that's alcohol, right? So how did you deal with that?
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, because it's a question that people ask me, because I was very open about my alcoholism to the people of God who came to church. And so occasionally after a mass, people would say, Father, I saw you take the chalice. I saw you take the blood of Christ. And I would say, yes, I did. But I would take such a small sip of it. Actually, wine was the last thing I did drink before I got sober, that bottle of Chardonnay, but wine wasn't so much a part of me. And I must confess that the altar wine in church is not the type of wine that you're going to be socializing with. So it wasn't it didn't satisfy my taste buds, and it certainly wasn't something that would trigger me. There is mustum, what some Catholic priests would use, mustum, which is a variation of it's non-alcoholic grape juice. But in my 16 years of sobriety, it never crossed my mind to drink based on drinking the blood of Christ.
Because it's interesting, because I have been, I've been sober for 14 years, and I still go to church regularly, right? And
Yes.
so, and I'm now an Episcopalian, Catholic light. And so many people will say to me, and I think it's a big question for people in recovery. And I love that we're talking about this, because so many people in recovery are like, wait a minute, what should I do when I go to church? Should I take, I'm sure you hear that a lot. So I love that you said that. Because for me, I'm a dipper. I'm not a sipper out of the chalice, right? I'm a dipper. And so that doesn't also, that for me has never triggered me, thank God, to pick up a drink. But it does have a lot of people that wondering, like, should I do this or should I not? And does it mean the same thing if I go to church and I don't take the wine? What do you think? What is your advice?
My suggestion would be not to drink the wine. I think I was programmed in my mind. I know willpower doesn't get somebody sober, although I think for me, it was the willpower and the desire that I was not going to drink that made that wine. I didn't view it as wine. I viewed it as the blood of Christ, which many people would do. But I would strongly suggest to the alcoholics listening not to drink.
And tell us this. So when the situation came up 2 years ago and you left, you're calling, and I'm sure there was so much fear, resentment, so many triggers that came up. I'm so sorry you had to go through that, because I can't even imagine. And then to think that you didn't pick up, and it must have been so hard. What did you do? What are some of the tools you use that you can share with us that helped you to get through?
I'd like to revisit that date and then, of course, talk about the tools, because the tools are what did it. But on that date, July 26, 2018, I was called into the chancery, which is the church headquarters, where the CEO / the bishop is. And when I was informed that this woman wrote this letter with these scathing allegations against me, and that I was going to be suspended. I was going to be sent away to a facility in Pennsylvania for an evaluation, psychological evaluation, and told to go back to the rectory, remove my stuff, and find a place to live. So here I get into my car, and we always could look for an excuse to drink and drug, and this was a perfect excuse to drink and drug. My legs had just been cut out for me. My life was up. It was completely convoluted at the time. But I turned to God. I turned to God at that moment. And then I called my sponsor while I was driving back from Rockville Center to Seaford. Many people don't know what I'm talking about. It's a short trip, 10, 15-minute trip. And just said do you feel like drinking? I said, no, I don't feel like drinking. And I came back to the rectory and I spoke to the pastor, and he said, stay for dinner, stay overnight. Don't worry about, getting everything out tonight. We'll work on that. We had a wonderful cook at that time who I helped get into recovery. And the gentleman just celebrated 3 years back in October, which is a great gift for him. But he came and I was sitting outside, just filled with remorse and pain. And he said to me, Stephen, he said, let me ask you 2 questions. And I said, sure, Michael. And he said, are you in trouble with the law? I said, no, there's nothing criminal involved with what may have occurred or what did not occur. I said, there's no trouble with the law. He says, okay. He says, do you have a life-threatening illness? And I guess I could have answered alcoholism, because that could be, but I knew what he implied, something, cancer or something else. I said, no. So he said, so what the hell's wrong? And at first I was taken back by it, but then I thought about it. I'm not in trouble with the law. And to this day, I remain not in trouble with the law. And with the grace of God, I don't have any life-threatening illnesses. addiction, sure, but I don't have cancer or anything else. I've been free of COVID-19 as of today, thank God. So then, as I was waiting for the time between that day and going to this facility in Pennsylvania, I worked the program. I spoke to people. I spoke to my sponsor. I spoke to others. I shared at the meetings. And I think that is so important because so often we hold things back. I could be very closed like a clam. And when I'm able to share my feelings and get feedback, or after the meeting, somebody may come up to me and talk to me, and don't keep things bottled up. I mean, I drank from a bottle for so many years, so why do I want to put things back into a bottle? Let me just be open about it. And what I've found in recovery is that we're as sick as our secrets. And to this day, I don't have any secrets whatsoever. I mean, the book was basically a public confession about things that I did, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I'd like to think that there's more good than bad and ugly. And yes, there are. But it is when we go through those moments of turmoil, when we go through those moments where we might be filled with angst, talk about it. Talk to a sponsor. Talk to people in the program. Get your butt to a meeting. Meeting makers make it. And I'm firmly convinced of that. In my home group, there's people there with 35, 40 years of sobriety. And I used to wonder, if I have this program for 35 years, why do I need to continue to go to meetings? Because it works. If something works, we do it. And so I was able to get through those darkest days of my life. And believe me, I miss celebrating the sacraments and being around. But Alcoholics Anonymous gives me an avenue where I'm still doing work. I'm still doing God's work with other addicts, with other alcoholics. And by helping them, I help myself. Yeah.
And being on here is helping people. It's like everything we do, it's showing up. It's even opening the door for someone. I have a question for you, Stephen. So for the person that's listening who's never been to a meeting, they're so scared. Because I can say for me, like that was the scariest thing for me ever to do, was like go to a meeting and raise my hand and say, I'm an alcoholic. Because even though I knew it for so long, and it was like more scary to me than buying cars, getting married, having children, all those things, right? And then there's so many people today, which is unfortunate, I think, that are scared of the God word. They're scared of it. I mean, it comes out sideways that I don't like God, I don't trust God, I hate that God stuff, for whatever reason it is personally to that person. And what is your advice to somebody that's coming in and they're so put off by it, but we need it? I mean, we need something higher. And, I know people say the doorknob. That always makes me feel kind of great.
Yes.
What is your advice to them?
It's like it was shared with me many years ago. You hang around a barbershop long enough, you get a haircut. And I think in AA, is what happens is, yes, people go to that first meeting scared out of their wits. This is something, who's going to see me? I can't go to a meeting in my town because, my neighbor's going to see me there or whatever. But to get to that meeting, put your hand up at that first meeting and say, my name is Stephen, I'm an alcoholic, and this is my first meeting. What will happen is the people will swarm around you like bees. They're going to be giving you a list of phone numbers. And here's a pet peeve of mine with those lists of phone numbers. What happens is Stephen comes into the meeting, puts his hand up, says, it's my first day back from rehab, or this is my first meeting. Everybody claps. Oh, glad to have you here. And then right away, the guys send around a meeting list, and you get a meeting list for that, whatever county you happen to live in. And it's got 28 names on it. Tommy, 631, blah, blah, blah. Billy, pop, pop, pop. All these different phone numbers. You don't know these people from Adam. And now I'm going to get on the phone and just dial, a 10-digit number and say, Tommy, my name is Stephen. I don't think I'd have the courage for that. So what I suggest to the veterans in the group, people like myself, is to go up to the newcomer. Say, my name is Stephen, and this is my phone number here. And nowadays everybody carries their phone with them. Put my phone number in your thing. Give me a call. Make that person feel welcome. And for the recipient of that, for the newcomer, is be open. Be open to the experience, and don't close your mind after one meeting. Not every AA meeting is for you. And I could be selfish at times. The meeting, I go to a meeting sometimes and like, well, what did I get out of it? It's not what I got out of it. It's how did I bring myself there and what am I putting into it? Because we only get out of something what we put into it. So for the newcomer, and when you hear all this talk about God, 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 it's what you believe. And it's not the religion that you were brought up in. It could be. I mean, I hear so many times people say, I went to Catholic school for 12 years. I did enough of that. It's not about Catholicism. It's not about any other religion whatsoever. It's about having a relationship with something much greater than ourselves. And yes, Elizabeth, you mentioned the doorknob. I've heard the great outdoors, good orderly direction, different acronyms that people may use, but to realize that we don't do this on our own. We do it with the help of a God of our understanding, the help of a higher power, and the support of the fellowship. And go to different meetings when they're open. And I know in different parts of the country they may be doing Zoom or whatever, which is a good venue. It's what we have now. Here on Long Island, there are a few groups that are meeting limited numbers, 20, 25 people. But go to different meetings. And when you're at these meetings, listen attentively. And when you hear people share, listen to their share. Do you want their recovery? I know people, and I don't want to knock people in AA. That's not what I'm here for. Of course not. But I've heard people with 35, 40 years of sobriety, and when they share at meeting, every other word is a curse. They're crying about this, crying about that. Is that my form of sobriety? I don't know. I do know it's not my form of sobriety. But, sober living isn't just putting the alcohol, the plug in a jug. Sober living is embracing this. And yes, we get to the 12 step as a result of having, worked these steps, bring it into all of our affairs. But by the same token, for the newcomer, give it a shot. Give it a second chance. And don't get turned off by God. Don't get turned off by those guys who come up to you with this intimidation. I'm going to be your sponsor. You'll call me at 8 o'clock every morning. We work this program on God's time and, of course, our time as well.
I love that, Stephen. I love that. I want to ask you one more question because it's a big question right now with what's going on in the world and politically and with the pandemic. And there's so many people that are out there praying. And so we come into this program and you talked about religion, you talked about spirituality. And people ask me all the time, how do I know I'm praying right? And I'd love for you to tell us your opinion on what is a right prayer, what is a wrong prayer, and if there is such a thing as a right prayer and a wrong prayer, and what is that and how important it is to your life today.
That's a great question, Elizabeth. And I firmly believe that with what's been going on with COVID-19, with this whole election crisis, and now we hear that the vaccines are coming out and 46% of the people may take the vaccine. What about the other 54%? How do we pray that I don't get COVID, or somebody that one of my loved ones doesn't get COVID? Prayer is conversation with God. And just as much when I meet somebody and I want to get to know them, what attracts me to somebody in the program or in life is there's common things that we have, whether they love sports. I'm a very avid sports fan. Unfortunately, my teams don't do too well. Let's just say my football team hasn't won a game this year, so you know who I root for. My baseball team plays in a town called Flushing, and at times they could be flushed in the toilet. So but with sports, and nobody could go to the games today anyway. But so if I'm speaking to somebody and they have some common interests, I love to go to Broadway. No Broadway until next year, but it's going to come back. There's common things, and we converse and we get to know better. When I'm praying, I'm conversing with the God of my understanding. And I could do formal prayers. I could do the Lord's Prayer, which we pray at many 12-step meetings. I could pray the Serenity Prayer. I could pray in the Catholic faith. There's something called the Rosary. beautiful form of prayer, and in different faiths they have prayer. What prayer works for me? I need to feel comfortable with my prayer, and prayer could be the formal thing that we read from the Bible. Prayer could be a prayer that we pray the serenity prayer. The serenity prayer is a beautiful prayer. If we really break it down into three different sentences, grant me to the serenity to accept the things I can't change. Wow. How many things can I change? I can't change what other people's behaviors are. So grant me the serenity to accept that. Change the things that I can. What is going on? Character defects, shortcomings, whatever. Change. I can change that. Stephen could do that in his own life. And the most important, the wisdom to know the difference. So I'm not changing anybody else. I can change myself, and I need to have that knowledge that I can. So I really believe that for me, prayer is the bookends of my day. I begin the day with prayer, thanking God, gratitude. Gratitude is so important. Maybe that's what our prayer could be, especially in this month of December. We're a couple of weeks away from Christmas for those in the Christian faith. Hanukkah in the Judeo faith begins this evening. Those are times of grace, and those are times of gratitude. One thing I ask my sponsees is for the first week that I work with them to write down 3 things every day that they're grateful for. It could be something as simple as a sunrise, if they wake up early. It could be the sunset. It could be a visit to a cousin or a friend. It could be anything. And when they look at that list, the common denominator in those 21 things, if they do 3 a day, 7 a day, is they all come from something greater than us, a higher power, a God, whoever we happen to call. And isn't that prayer? Isn't gratitude prayer?
Oh, Stephen, thank you so much for coming on today. This has been wonderful. I'm
Thank you.
grateful that I got to meet you. I'm grateful you wrote this book, and hopefully it'll help so many people. I'll have the link for the YouTube, and I'll have the book cover on the site. And I just want to wish you many blessings and Merry Christmas to you. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Elizabeth, thank you so much for having me. Merry Christmas to those who celebrate Christmas. Happy Hanukkah for those who begin their celebration tonight, and happy holidays. And God bless all of you. Thank you.